am Ramsburg, and I am an anime journalist for Comic Book Resources, also most popularly known as CBR. So welcome to Anime Journalism 101. This is my first time speaking at an anime panel, so bear with me. I was actually born and raised in St. Pete, so being able to do this for the first time in my home city is extra special to me. So in this panel, I'm going to talk about Comic Book Resources, which is a global platform for digital journalism in the pop culture space. So we do articles on anime, TV, movies, comic books, etc. At Comic Book Resources, I write features, news articles, exclusives, and interviews. In this panel, I will discuss all the different types of articles and what they mean and how you can write them yourself. First off, was a little bit of background about myself. I graduated from the University of Florida and double majored in history and geography. And I actually started in the travel industry initially and ended up during the pandemic pivoting my career to writing and journalism. And in May of 2021, I was hired by Comic Book Resources as an anime features writer. So behind me is an example of an anime feature. This is actually the first one I've ever written for CBR. It was Naruto 5 Jutsus That'd Be Useless in Real Life. And this actually, this first piece that I ever did actually became the #1 piece of that week. And that was actually still one of the most viewed articles I have done. I have written over 150 articles for CBR, and this is still one of my prized possessions because it was first and it was special to me. A typical feature article is 600 to 800 words, and typically takes about an hour to write, depending on how much research you have to do and how fast of a writer you are. And for each feature, we use a feature image that is 1400 by 700 that is very bright and eye-captivating. We have a photo department at CBR who actually is dedicated to photoshopping and creating beautiful images like this that are specific for that piece. And we also have other types of features that are considered mini features that are typically 400 to 600 words. And these are smaller pieces, often breaking articles. Features are different from news pieces because they are essay styled, and they usually pertain to analysis of a specific topic in the anime sphere. So it could be about any anime character, about their past, or how other anime compare to one another. So this is one of the first anime topics that I pitched, and it's about how Kakashi had the makings of a stereotypical anime villain, but he became Hokage instead. And in this piece, I delve into his history and his character design and how he became a Hokage. The way it works at CBR is writers have two options when it comes to features. They can either pitch an article topic, and like I did with this one, and if the editors like it and they approve of it and they give you the green light to go ahead and write it. If it's a more niche type of article that they don't think will garner too many views or not enough people will be interested, they can deny a pitch topic. So it's important to make sure that it's relevant and something you would think a global audience would want to read about. And the second way a feature writer can write an article is the editors sometimes create their own article titles, and the writers will claim these articles if they think that they have the expertise and background to write on that topic. Typically, it's writers who pitch the topics. Editors do have very, very good insights and views, so a lot of times those become very popular articles, the ones that the editors make themselves for writers. But pitching is definitely the most fun because then you can do a topic that you really care about and think you can write really well in. For example, one of my favorite articles I enjoyed writing was Death Note's Light Yagami versus Code Geass, Lelouch v. Britannia, and who would outsmart the other. And in this article, I meshed two very popular anti-heroes and animes to compare their strengths and weaknesses and how they would likely interact if they were in the same universe and able to try to outwit each other, and they still have the same powers that they had in their own respective animes. Another type of feature writing that we do at CBR is breakout articles. These articles are usually 400 to 600 words because these are very time-sensitive articles. In these articles, we typically cover a specific anime and we write about each episode that comes out. And these are not summary pieces of the article. We don't simply summarize what happened in the latest episode in each anime. We actually give an analytical perspective of what happened in that episode and like why it's important to a certain character or a certain theme or plot point. So these articles, the way it works is CBR writers will be assigned or claim a certain series for that entire season, and that writer becomes the lead writer of that anime for its entirety of that season. For example, I was the lead writer for Yashahime, and it's season 2 this past fall. Yashahime, for those who don't know, have 24 episodes in a season. So I wrote a Yashahime breakout article once a week for 6 months, which equated to 24 Yashahime breakout articles during that time period of its entire course of season 2. And in each of these specific pieces, I discuss what was so vital about the latest episode. Another type of feature that we can do is almost a list type article. I'm sure many of you have seen like top 10 this, top 10 that. And those are list writers who are dedicated to doing just lists. For us feature writers, we tend to do 5 and limit ourselves to half that amount so that we can do a deeper dive in our writing about each thing. So in this article, I did 5 great anime for tsundere lovers so that those who love tsundere characters had a frame of reference on which animes would be recommended for them to watch. And this is another beautiful image that our photo department photoshopped, so shout out to them. They do incredible work. And in this one, I list out the popular animes that have tsundere characters like Fruits Basket and Inuyasha and Maid-sama. I love that one. And in these feature articles, we also like to include backlinks to former CBR articles that are relevant to the content so that those who are fans of these shows can find more articles that are relevant to them and their personal taste in anime. At CBR, we aren't pigeonholed exactly to our departments. So while I am an anime features writer, we have very different topics under our umbrella since we do all pop culture. So we have comics and movies, TV, anime, and gaming. So even though I'm an anime writer, I do get to branch out. I have done K-drama features that overlap with webtoons, like this one I did on the best K-dramas based on webtoons. And I also was able to do a video game feature for Obey Me before the anime itself came out. because I used to play Obey Me as a mobile game, so I was able to offer a guide to all the Demon Brothers, so those who have heard of the anime but not the game could be introduced to the characters and have a feel for them before the anime actually debuted. So we are able to branch out and write under other departments at times, so it's not always strictly anime series. For example, I actually write a lot of webtoon features. That's actually one of my big niches in CBR, is that I'm one of the lead writers for all things webtoon. Which brings me to my next type of feature article. Actually, no, not feature article. Type of article. These are news and exclusives, which are definitely different than features. News and exclusives are about the facts, reporting it timely. So these are not analytical pieces where we are inserting our own perspective and our own opinion. We are providing the news as the news comes to us. So this is very different. And there's 3 types of news that we do. We have news, breaking news, and exclusives. And I will briefly go over the difference of these types of news pieces. So in regular news, a lot of us writers will receive press releases directly from the entertainment companies and their contacts. For example, sometimes I will get a representative from Crunchyroll or Funimation who reach out to me with a press release, and they provide me the information that they want us to share. And these press releases are often provided to several journalists that they know and have on their contact list. So for these types of news pieces, they're usually short, 400 to 600 words, and they are timely, usually about a day turnaround at most. And then we have breaking news, which is a piece that of news that has to go out as soon as possible, within the hour, because everyone is finding out about it all at the same time, and everyone wants to be the first one on that news. So breaking news is very important when it comes to being fast at writing and formatting and getting it to your editor. And then the third type of news that we write in anime is my favorite type, which is exclusives. These exclusives they're similar to news pieces where we will receive a press release from a news source or an entertainment company. But instead of it being circulated to a bunch of journalists who can all have access to the information and to the press release, they only contact you for that specific story, and you're the only journalist or writer in the world that has the content and the press release to break that news. For example, my first ever exclusive was for Webtoon and DC Comics. Shout out to all my friends at Webtoon. Webtoon is who I work the most closely with. I receive many news stories and exclusives and interviews from Webtoon in particular. So for this exclusive, it was DC and Webtoon's upcoming collaboration, Vixen New York City. And in this press release, they provided exclusive, never-before-seen images of the upcoming Webtoon and DC Comics collaboration. So not only did they give me all the information that no one else had access to, but I also had the images that had never been seen before. So after I wrote the piece, and I was the first one to break it because I was the only one with that information, Webtoon and DC Comics actually shared my article on all of their social media platforms because I was the only one who wrote about the collaboration. And this was kind of a surreal moment for me because I saw my name up on DC Comics, Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and same for Webtoon. And that was a very special piece to me for being the first ever exclusive that they trusted me with. And so for these news pieces, the one thing that's really important to keep in mind is embargoes. Embargoes are an industry limit on when you can share information. So it's incredibly important to keep embargoes in mind and to not break them. For example, if Webtoon sends me a press release with the information ahead of time and they tell me it's under embargo until tomorrow at 2 p.m., I will write the article with the information ahead of time and make sure my editor knows that's under embargo so that they know to publish it at tomorrow at 2 p.m. Once the embargo is lifted. Because these entertainment companies and news sources are trusting us with their information ahead of time. So they trust you not to break the news before they want you to. It's the reason why they give it to you ahead of time is so you have the time to write the article and have it ready for when they want the news to drop. But you cannot drop it ahead of time, or that's like the easiest way to lose trust in the industry and never receive a press release ever again. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Another very important type of article that I write for Comic Book Resources are interviews. These are my favorite type of articles because they're incredibly special. There we go. So for interviews, sometimes we actually get an invite to interview a creative in the entertainment industry and anime industry. So as I said before, I work very closely with Webtoon. And a month back, they contacted me and asked me if I would like to interview Patrick R. Young and Nico Baskunin, who are the creators behind Red Hood Outlaws, the DC comic and Webtoon collaboration that dropped just a few weeks ago, actually, and it's phenomenal, so go read it if you have the chance. And this was an amazing piece. I was able to interview the creatives. They were the writer and artist for Red Hood Outlaws, and I got to interview them via Zoom for about 45 minutes. They were great people. It was a very laid-back interview, and we were able to get very personal about their perspective, and this was an exclusive interview. So what we did with Webtoon is 2 weeks prior to Red Hood Outlaws hitting the Webtoon platform was when they asked me to interview them, and they did not have any interviews at the time for them personally, and we decided that it would be great to drop this interview a few days prior to Red Hood Outlaws being launching on the Webtoon platform, so we could give fans a perspective of the creators behind the series and allow them to show like their personal touch and how their creative process works. And this also generated a lot of hype online because Red Hood Outlaws is already a very popular DC character, and a lot of people were already very excited about this series. So when we dropped the interview, we strategically decided to incorporate never-before-seen imagery of the series as well. So not only were fans getting the interview and reading the Q&As, for example, those are like the Q&As, they also got to see never-before-seen imagery of the series itself so that they knew what to expect when they read Red Hood Outlaws, which came out a few days after this interview dropped. And I also have in the works another Webtoon interview that I had just done last week that will be coming in the next 2 weeks, but we're waiting on a video that we also did with the creator to also incorporate into the interview article that we did last week. So very much looking forward to that one as well. So now that I explained like a lot of the fun stuff, one thing I realized I forgot to mention was as a journalist, not all topics can be like very positive. We typically stick to positive stories. We often write about animes that we really love or really passionate about, but sometimes we have to like give like an honest opinion or perspective of a series or a movie that we watched, and sometimes that can be slightly negative or in our analysis. So, for example, I am a ginormous Fruits Basket fan. That's actually the first manga I ever read back in middle school. My friend Alexa let me borrow her manga. And so Fruits Basket was what introduced me to the anime and manga world. So I love Fruits Basket and Kyo and Team Kyo and everything. But I went to see Fruits Basket Prelude in theaters because I had to write articles on the movie and what I honestly thought of the movie. And while I love these characters and everything, I did have to do an article that dealt with the uncomfortable conversations surrounding the movie and the love story and some of like the more problematic themes, which doesn't mean that it's a bad movie. It's just that there's a lot of talk and conversation to be had around the movie's content. So sometimes as journalists we have to be honest and delve into a more negative outlook or perspective on a series just to be open and honest with it. So now that I talked about my work as a CBR anime journalist, it's time to get into why you all came here, which is for how you can become an anime journalist yourself, and my 5 top tips on how to become an anime journalist if it's something you're interested in or a field you want to dabble in and break into. So for my first major tip, it's to study the subject matter. Most people, especially if you're here, you're probably already extremely familiar with anime content. You probably consume it all the time, so you probably already have this one down pretty pat. So studying the subject matter is just to consume and view anime and manga content far and wide. One of the biggest things is to introduce yourself to anime and manga that you wouldn't normally like or be comfortable with. Like, for example, I'm not really big in the horror genre. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat, so I tend to stay away from series like Attack on Titan or the Nina episode in Full Metal Alchemist. That still haunts me to this day. So, like, sometimes we have to, even though it's something that isn't necessarily our cup of tea or something we would typically want to watch ourselves, we have to, for the sake of journalism and for having that wider, broader perspective of anime content. So it definitely stick to the stuff you love, that's very important, but also trying to delve more into the ones that are outside your comfort zone. For my second major tip on how to become an anime journalist is to practice writing. While many people can talk about anime at length and make very sound arguments for their anime characters and their favorite anime, it's definitely a different beast of its own to write about it in a very persuasive way to a global audience and keeping the audience in mind during your writing. So the more you write, the more prepared you will be to make the transition from being an anime consumer and an anime fan to being an anime journalist. So practicing writing, just typical essay, grammar, argumentative essays, all of that will really help you when it comes time to actually apply to be a journalist at one of the platforms. So that is just a very easy way to prepare yourself to be a journalist, is to practice and practice and practice with writing. And the third tip to be an anime journalist is to practice journalism. So for journalism, you want to research and familiarize yourself with the best journalism practices, especially in a digital sphere. There are a lot of do's and don'ts to journalism, so it is a lot to keep in mind when you start off in the field and the industry. There's a lot of rules around plagiarism and copywriting that you definitely want to keep in mind before you become a journalist and to prevent yourself from getting sued. For example, I cannot tell you how many versions of my articles, word for word, are out there online. There are many websites for whatever reason, I don't know if they're robots or not, but they take our articles and copy it word for word and post it on their websites and platforms. We have a legal team at CBR who we contact whenever we find our articles plagiarized word for word and which websites are the ones that are doing it. So we do have a legal team to combat this issue, but it does constantly crop up, so it's like putting out fires whenever they come. So plagiarism is a big issue in the journalism sphere. And when it comes to yourself writing anime articles, you want to make sure to just never plagiarize and copy word for word from another article or another journalist. It's okay to find like inspiration online, especially from Reddit threads. Everyone loves Reddit. But it's important to make sure that your arguments are your own and your points are also your own. And just to avoid plagiarism and do research so you can make your own arguments. And another thing under journalism is to make sure that you follow the embargo rules and everything else. So for the fourth tip on how to become an anime journalist yourself is to learn about the anime industry itself. There is a lot of inner workings and things that go on behind the scenes to create the magic that you find on TV before the anime hits your TV. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's important to build connections in the entertainment industry and in the anime industry in order to be a successful journalist. Your reputation as a journalist means everything, and it takes a while to really build credit and to build a reputation within the industry to make it so that people know to contact you. For example, when I started receiving press releases from Crunchyroll and Webtoon and all the other entertainment platforms, I was very surprised that they heard of me, they found my contacts, and they knew to reach out to me. And it's because they simply saw my CBR articles online, and maybe I wrote about a specific anime or webtoon that they were looking at or Googling at the time, and they decided to take a look at my author profile on CBR, and they found my email and reached out to me. And in these email correspondence, it's important to build a connection with these contacts in the industry. So saying simple things like, I look forward to our continued partnership, or I look forward to working with you again, goes a long way and makes these contacts feel comfortable enough to come to you with the next press release or the next exclusive story. So the reputation means everything, and this also includes producing stories in a timely manner. So the more you produce stories that these contacts give you, and you write a good story for them, and you write it on time, the more they trust you with their work, with their news stories and press releases. So it's very, very important to maintain that relationship and maintain your reputation. And lastly, my final piece of advice for if you want to become an anime journalist is to simply apply. There are many platforms, comic book resources obviously being one of them, where you can apply to be a writer on their platform. It's simple. You do need to make sure that you have writing samples before you apply. Sometimes you might be a blogger who already has their own blog and website, and you can provide your blog posts as an example during these, while you're applying and providing your writing samples to these platforms. So making sure you have your resume handy and several writing samples before you think about applying to the platforms, because they're all going to require them. So it's good to just take your time, produce some good samples, and tweak your resume before applying. Yeah, I think that's it. And if you work hard and practice and study the subject matter, writing, journalism, the anime industry itself, and apply, you may find yourself up here as well one day. So now I am going to open it up to Q&A. We finished a little early, so if anyone has any questions about anime journalism or how to become an anime journalist or what it's like to write and work for CBR, please feel free to raise your hands or come up on stage and let me know. Yes?
Yeah, so how does anime rhetoric and professional writing or language differ from some of the other journalistic work or other journalism in the United States or elsewhere?
Yes, that's an amazing question. Her question was, how does anime journalism differ from other types of journalism and writing that you would find outside of the anime sphere? That is a very good question. A lot of it is very similar because you're going to want to use the same writing rules, the same journalism practices that you would do in, say, writing for a newspaper or an online publication. So a lot of it does overlap. The difference with anime and pop culture writing itself is that there is a lot more creative freedom when it comes to anime journalism. A lot of the essay articles, like I said, are topics that the writer pitches themselves and feels like they know the content very strongly. So there's a lot of room to write about stuff that you're passionate about, and the editors are usually a lot more welcoming to new ideas, even if it's like an anime argument you've never heard before. If you're able to provide evidence and arguments that are found in the animes itself, they will let you write those articles, and so there's a lot of creative freedom in anime. So I would say that that's one of the biggest differences than most journalism practices, because a lot of journalism is the facts, like news sources and news articles, but when it comes to anime features and anime writing itself, it is a lot more creative and I would say fun almost. So yeah, that would be the difference. Any other questions? Yes.
Is CBR the first website you wrote for, or have you wrote other places beforehand?
Yes. Is this on? Can you hear me?
No.
No,
It's not on, we hear you.
Yeah.
I think it died.
it might have died. I might have this one too. Let's see if this one works.
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So for CBR, that's a great question. He asked me if CBR was the first platform that I ever wrote for. Yes, it is the first digital publication I ever wrote for. How I got to CBR was very fascinating because, as I said in my opening remarks, I double majored in history and geography, and I ended up in the travel industry. But because of COVID, the travel industry obviously took a tank, because I started out in the travel industry in 2019, and very early 2019, and then by 2020, the COVID hit, and I had to pivot my career. And during this time, while I was reflecting on where I wanted to be and what industry I wanted to be in, I went back to my gut feeling of always wanting to be a writer. And I took the pandemic as an opportunity to refocus on my writing, and I decided I really wanted to be a journalist and write online. So I actually made a blog and an author website because I also write fantasy novels. And so I used my author platform and my author blog to apply to CBR for the very first time. And at my first time applying, they decided to hire me as a feature writer in early 2021. And that became my first ever writing job. And now I am actually a full-time writer for the University of Florida, which is my alma mater. And while I am a full-time writer for the University of Florida, go Gators, I am also a CBR anime journalist on the side. So luckily CBR's schedule is very lenient, and you do it on your own time, so it's very easy to do like journalism, especially for CBR, as well as having a full-time job, depending on what your responsibilities already are. So that was a great question. It was my first publication, and it helped me get deeper and deeper into the writing sphere. Yeah.
Without an English degree, how did you pivot your career and kind of make the decision to go into writing and have them accept you as experienced?
No, that is a great question. Her question was, as someone who majored in history and geography and didn't major in English, how was I able to pivot my career to become a writer, given my background? Well, the story starts off back as elementary school when I first decided I wanted to be a writer, and I was writing poems and stage plays and novels, and everyone was telling me as I grew up to not major in English, to not to pursue writing. Also, people weren't thrilled about me majoring in history because they thought that was another major that didn't directly lead into a specific job or career. And in this society, we're taught not to take risks and deviate. And STEM is usually the safer bet when it comes to your career and education. But even though I didn't decide to major in English because of a lot of people discouraging me and telling me that wasn't the best major, I decided after working in the travel industry and during the pandemic that I wanted to go back to my lifelong dream of becoming a writer. During the pandemic, when I said I practiced writing during the pandemic, I was also writing novels. So I wrote 2 novels during the pandemic. So I was able to fully focus on my writing for a few months during the pandemic when it first started. And I like to say that if it wasn't for COVID or the pandemic, I probably wouldn't be up here right now. I probably wouldn't be a writer. I would probably still be in the travel industry, working my way up in that industry instead, because that felt like a safer bet to work in travel and hospitality. But since I was laid off in March 2020, like many of my fellow travel industry professionals, I really had the chance to focus strictly on writing. And as you asked about how they knew to take a chance on me, while I was writing novels, that's when I established my author website and started writing my astrology blog called Ramsburg. And I use these examples for my application for CBR. So I'll give you a hint. When I applied for CBR, my writing sample was actually the Konoha 12 as astrology signs. Because Naruto is my favorite anime of all time. I love Naruto. Kakashi is my favorite anime character, which is why I wrote that essay article in the beginning of my CBR career. And in this article that I pitched to CBR, I basically took all their personalities and assigned them to which zodiac sign I thought they were. Like, for example, Kiva is an Aries, just like me, which is why my blog is called Ramstrology, because it's a play on my last name, Ramsburg, and the fact I'm an Aries Ram. And so I described how Kiva has the personality traits of Aries, and I assigned this to every one of the 12 Konoha 12, and that is the writing sample and article that got me the job at CBR. So I was able to take my personal novel writing and my personal blog to incorporate anime and get into CBR. They just happened to like my writing style and the article that I pitched. And after working for CBR for almost half a year, that's when I applied to the University of Florida to be a full-time writer. And they actually really valued my experience at CBR, and that's one of the reasons I got hired by US as well to become a writer. So it is about taking chances. It is luck and timing. I like to call it a fluke sometimes, but it really is just practicing writing, getting it out there. Like if you can make a website or a blog to showcase your writing so others can view it and see your writing style, that really helps get other platforms to trust you and to trust your writing. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
Do you think anime journalism has influenced the popularity of anime? It was like a wider U.S. audience or local audience, or do you feel it remained largely within the anime community?
Yes, that's a great question. She asked if anime journalism has helped the popularity of anime, especially in the U.S., to promote visibility to the anime sphere itself, or if it's still mostly contained to those who are already fans. I definitely think that anime journalism has played a major role in the visibility and popularity of anime. I'm sure you guys all get this as well. Like, Google loves to recommend articles and content that they think that you would really like or be interested in. And this happens to me a lot with my own articles, where they will suggest I read my own articles on the Google homepage. And I'm like, I don't need to read it. I wrote it. I'm tired of reading this. So in these homepages and on social media, when people share anime articles or anime content, it makes those who happen to scroll past it curious about what this anime is, especially when anime has so many characters who are very eye-catching and they have very unique character design. And you want to know, like, what's the backstory? Like, who are these characters? Like, if you see Naruto with his ninja headband, like, so many people have been exposed to just the image of Naruto that it makes them curious to know more about him. So if they see an article on social media or on their search engine that specifically shows these different animes, they're more likely to click on it and to read it, even if they were never exposed to anime before or don't know anything about its content. You can get new viewers that way. It's just like K-pop. If anyone's a big K-pop fan here, I'm ARMY myself. Go BTS. It's just like K-pop. And in the recent years, both K-pop and anime have had a major explosion in the U.S. And I do think that the pandemic has helped with that. I do think that people, when they were at home more, they were more open to content they had never consumed before. Everyone was tired of watching the same reruns of The Office on Netflix, and they decided that they were going to finally try anime for the first time. And then anime journalism really helped those who had no exposure to it, like, get their feet wet and just sample it before they actually committed to it. So I do think anime journalism has played a very strong role in helping boost the popularity and visibility of anime and the industry itself. And that is also, I would like to say, that's also happening with Webtoon as well, the Korean platform that posts Korean manhwas, which are amazing, amazing stories. I am a ginormous fan of Webtoon. I cannot promote them enough. I do see that same explosion that we've seen in anime and K-pop happening with Webtoon right now. And that is evident in how popular K-dramas have been in the recent years. Everyone's seen Squid Games. And so I do think that Webtoon and K-drama is the next big explosion. So hopefully that answers your question. Any more questions? Yes.
So what are your thoughts on, like, Webtoon versus, like, manga, like with Shonen Jump? Like, do you think they're easily comparable, or do you think there's, like, very key differences, or?
Yes, that's a great question. She asked me how I feel about manga and manhwa and the differences between them, or the similarities between them. I love them both. Manga was like the thing that everyone was reading for years. And I think that because of platforms like Webtoon and TappyToon and all the other Webtoon manhwa platforms, I think that has led to a big explosion in Webtoons and manhwa. While manga was always the traditional way people would go to the bookstore or the comic store and they would buy their volumes of manga, with Webtoons, it's a digital platform. And while they do have printed versions of manhwa, but the biggest consumer is online, digitally. And because it's online, it's a lot more accessible, and a lot more people get to read it, and you can even read them for free on the Webtoon platform. So it's something that's really easy to get to the reader. So I think that's one of the reasons why manhwa's really come up a lot. If anyone's seen Tower of God, that's a Korean manhwa. That's why they have Stray Kids, the K-pop group that I love, doing Stay. Like, they are doing the intro and outro to Tower of God Season 1 because those are what's becoming popular. Noblesse, also Korean manhwa. So Webtoon actually launched a new platform recently with Wattpad, and they are a studio now. So they are going to, they already started, but they're going to be producing more animes that are Korean manhwas. So while they're similar, and manga is Japanese, and what we're normally used to, these Korean manhwas are becoming bigger and bigger. And not only are they going to have the animation studio with animated animes like Tower of God and Noblesse, a lot of these manhwas get turned into very popular K-dramas, just like True Beauty, and recently there's the All of Us Are Dead that came out on Netflix very shortly after Squid Games. So that one was really popular because people were looking for the next Squid Games, and people were more exposed to K-dramas at that point. And that was also a Webtoon series. So while there are a lot of similarities with manga and manhwa in their art style and their beauty and everything, I think the consumption is probably where the biggest difference is, because most manga readers are still reading physical copies of manga, and they are getting it from their comic book stores and bookstores, while most manhwa readers are getting it online, typically for free, or they can use coins to fast pass episodes. So the consumption is where the biggest difference lies. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
What's the difference in what you focused on when you're writing about K-dramas or K-pop versus anime?
Yes. She asked me what the difference was when I'm writing about K-dramas and webtoons versus when I'm writing anime articles. So I would say it's very similar, but as I said with the last question, where with webtoons, that's where I would get my K-drama crossover articles. So whenever I write about K-dramas, it's usually because it was originally a webtoon, and I'm talking about the differences between the actual webtoon itself and the adaptation in the K-drama live action form. So with webtoon, I will usually do articles specifically geared to only webtoon. With animes, most of the articles are either about only that specific anime, or I will tie in one or two characters that are relevant to the argument. I would say, writing-wise, journalistically, that it's about the same when I'm writing about webtoon or writing about anime, but again, the content itself is very different. So that kind of shows up in the writing and in the article. You can see the differences. I originally started writing about anime, and for a while, for the first few months, it was just about anime. But then CBR decided very shortly after I started working there that, hey, webtoons is super popular now. Like, we need to start writing more features about this. Like, does anyone read webtoons? Like, that can actually write articles or cover this? And I was like, I do. So I started writing a lot of features about webtoon so that our department could start getting its feet wet and like cross into the webtoon space. And ever since I did that, it started taking off more and more. And that's when webtoon itself found me. And I found incredible contacts over there at Webtoon who email me and give me these exclusives and interview pieces. So that's how I kind of transitioned to mostly anime to, I would probably say primarily Webtoon now. I do a lot of Webtoon pieces. I'm a huge fan. Yes?
How often do you find yourself reading or watching things that you wouldn't have consumed otherwise in order, to write articles?
Yes, that is a great question. He asked me how often I would find myself consuming content I normally wouldn't otherwise. This does come up quite a bit. So, for example, as I said before, I interviewed the creatives behind Red Hood Outlaws recently, and I was embarrassed to say that I hadn't read any comics on Red Hood previously. And I was like, I cannot talk to the creators of Red Hood Outlaws without knowing about Red Hood himself. And so I did a lot of research and digging, and my boyfriend told me a lot about Red Hood because he loves DC Comics. So I studied up and made sure that I was prepared for this interview with them so that I wouldn't embarrass myself in front of the creators. I do read a lot of series or watch anime series that I think will pertain to a particular article, even though I hadn't been exposed to it previously. So for example, I did an article back during the Tokyo Olympics. It was the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, but it didn't happen in 2020. I think it happened in 2021, I think, was when they postponed it to. I think they're able to do it at the end of last year. And I did 7 anime to prepare you for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. And in that article, I talked about a lot of sports anime. And I hadn't seen a lot of sports anime before this. I saw Haiku, and that was the only one. And so in that article, I had to go and read up on Free, the swim one. And there's the rock climbing one that came out. That was actually a very new anime at the time when I wrote that article. So I had to go up and actually watch these animes so I could incorporate them into my Olympic CBR article. And I really loved that piece. My thing came off actually. But that was a very good piece, which also had a great photo department work on it. But that was one of the major times where I had to go out of my way to watch an anime that wasn't typically in my wheelhouse because I really didn't watch sports anime that much until that article. So I would think that one would probably be my... Oh, I forgot the K in Tokyo. I know how to spell Tokyo, I swear. Wow, we did a lot of these. Oh, wait, no. What was it called? I will find it. If anyone has any other questions, I can answer in the meantime. Yes?
Is there anything you tend to avoid or try to avoid when writing about anime?
Yes. Oh, there it is. I found the article. Great photography on that one. That was the sports anime one that I did. So she asked me if there was anything that I typically try to avoid while I'm writing. As I said before, I do typically avoid negative articles because I do not like confrontation. And I do not like fan bases coming at me when they don't agree with my opinion or my article. I remember having so much anxiety the night before my Fruits Basket Prelude article was published on CBR because I know everyone loves Fruits Basket. I love Fruits Basket. I know how dedicated us fans are. So I was very worried that people were going to be like, no, Fruits Basket is perfect. There's no room for criticism. So I was very worried. But luckily I only had a few. Only had a couple of those people. So I do try to typically avoid negativity and too much controversy because that's personally my writing style. There are journalists and writers who are the opposite of me. They prefer controversy and stirring the pot, and because a lot of those articles tend to get more views because it's so controversial, and so many people are like, this can't be right, and they read the article to see what kind of argument this person could possibly be making. So there are writers who do prefer to lean into the controversy, to mix things up a bit, but my personal writing style, I tend to avoid that just to make my life a little easier. Another thing I like to avoid is cliches and anything that's been beaten to death, any arguments that have been done over and over again, and it would just be my voice in the void, just adding to it. So those are probably the biggest things I would avoid would be controversy and not being original, having the same arguments that many other journalists and writers have already made. So those are my biggest no-nos for me personally.